Tatskalau at Himima Kala Tiwama. Inamonik Dwas, Joel Moffett, Soyapatimki, Tumyaptayo, Nimiputimki. Good day, everyone. My name is Joel Moffett. I'm a citizen of the Nez Perce tribe, and I serve as the Director of Environmental and Special Projects here at Native Americans in Philanthropy. And thank you for joining us for Native American Philanthropy's Member Education Series, focusing on healing the land today. This is our second discussion, which focuses on Indigenous-led conservation efforts. If this is your first time joining us, the goal of these sessions is to share topics and issues that affect our communities from the perspective of those most impacted, and provide the opportunity for the philanthropic sector to learn from those individuals in our communities, and then to act on those goals and priorities. Today's topic, Healing the Land, will feature the perspective of Indigenous community leaders working through grassroots or local action efforts to make a change in conservation. While many Indigenous nations are using their unique legal positions to protect and perpetuate Indigenous ecological practices, there are often gaps in the work due to limited capacity or resources. Seeing these additional needs, Indigenous communities and grassroots organizations continue to stand in these gaps to support their cultures and protect our territories. We are excited to share this discussion and the experiences of these phenomenal leaders as they have navigated philanthropic spaces to access the vital funding needed to support their missions. It is my honor to introduce today's panel. We have Valerie Nuvayestewa, Margo Robbins, and Julia Bernal. I'd like to welcome them each to introduce themselves and then share more with us about their organizations. So first I'll pass it over to Valerie.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Valerie Nuvayestewa. I am Hopi and Tewa from the village of Tewa. I'm Tewa Corn Clan. And I'm also the project coordinator for Titsquat Okaltoinani. It's a grassroots environmental organization whose mission is to clean the mesa here at First Mesa from top to bottom. And you can see a picture of what the mesa looks like or used to look like in its pristine state behind me in my background. And that's how we want to return our home to. And so I don't know if I pass it on to the next person or.
Yeah, thanks, Valerie. Next up, I'll ask Margo to introduce herself.
Ayukui Neknau Margo Robbins, Wamechok Morik, Yurok village along the Klamath River. Kichnak, the executive director of the Cultural Fire Management Council, co-lead of the Indigenous Peoples Burn Network, and a board member on the Indigenous Stewardship Network. But most importantly, I'm a mom and a grandma and a cultural practitioner.
Thanks, Margo. And last but not least, I'll ask Julia to introduce herself.
Yes, good morning. Hinamopuyu Haremba, Tataikam Kitupa, Tatoshoitoyai. I am Julia Bernal. I am from Sandia Pueblo, and I'm also Yuchi. And I am the executive director of Pueblo Action Alliance. And we are a Pueblo Femme Women Two-Spirit-led climate justice organization focusing on a lot of youth climate action and climate policy on a local, regional, national, and international level, and are based here in so-called New Mexico.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. I failed to mention I am zooming in from Washington, D.C. today, but that's not normally my home. I am from Idaho, but I live right now on Suquamish land outside of Seattle on the Pacific Northwest. So it's good to have a good cross-section of tribal leaders from across Indian country join us today and give their perspectives. And so with that introduction, I'll go into our suite of questions here today. And first, I'd like to ask Valerie, how did you get started doing this work, and how has your culture informed that work?
Okay, so we started cleaning with our family. Like, we've always been cleaning the mesa and stuff. We always do like our Earth Day cleanup. And so we got more formally organized in 2016. And the reason we started doing more formally organization of our work is that my father, his name is Sakkongvaya, that's green tobacco standing in a row. Leon Nuvayestewa is his name. He walks this mesa. He walks it all the time, 2 to 3 miles a day. He's always on the trails, and not only just for his health, but also for ceremonial reasons, using the trails to deposit, prayer feathers and different things. And he noticed that it was starting to build a lot, the trash on the sides of the mesa, and he just came back really upset one day from his walk, and just we knew he was upset. He walked into the house and just sat down and told us, he said, we got to do something about this trash. We have to start cleaning. And we could tell that he was very upset about it just by the tone of his voice. So he told us, if nobody's going to do anything about this, I'm going to do something about this. And so then we really started moving forward and just trying to be more organized. And my sister Marissa Nuvayestewa and my niece Lori Nuvayestewa, they're the ones that started to really go after some money, some funding, and to help us secure like just what we needed, our tools, trash bags, even, whatever we needed to start cleaning. So we like I said, we started in 2016. And so we've been going annually every year. We used to be known as First Mesa Annual Cleanup, and we just recently, in the past couple of years, changed our name to Tutsquat Okautoinani, which means helping the earth to gather her strength. And because people in our own community used to ask us, what are you guys doing? So when you say Tutsquat Okautoinani to any elder, they know what you're doing. They know the work you're doing. So that's how we got started. And we believe we believe that we were always told that we had different worlds that we emerged from. And every time the first, second, and third worlds were destroyed because people were not living in harmony. And so right now we're living in the fourth world. And so we feel that it's getting to the point where we need to do something proactive, just reminding people of our cultural values, because we are in that fourth world. And we did make a covenant to keep this land clean with the person who was residing here. His name is Masao, a deity that lived here in this fourth world. And he lived humbly as a farmer. Only with he passed on to us a planting stick, seeds, a gourd of water, and told us that if we can live like him, that we're welcome to live in this land with him. And so that's the covenant that we accepted when we accepted the seeds and the planting stick and the gourd of water. So we're just trying to uphold that covenant and remind people of it, because our people know about it. Everybody knows the story. We all grew up listening to this story. We know what world we're in right now. We feel like we're on the brink of possibly coming into the fifth world. So we just know that there's it feels like there's a time crunch where we're trying to get all of this work done quickly because we don't know what's coming next, but we also don't want to be in a state of fear. We want to move together collectively with our people so that we're all on the same page about this. And like I said, we want to restore the health mainly to our mesa right now, because this is the place that we gather for ceremonies. There's like over 1,000 people that come from Hopi, from the first Mesa village. There's Tewa village that you see in the background. There's Sitsomovi that's also on this mesa, and there's also Walpi at the furthest end of the mesa. And so there's about 1,000 people that are enrolled in those 3 villages and who do come home from the local border towns to come for the different ceremonies. So we just really feel that removing the trash from the mesa, the earth is going to be able to revive itself again and to feel those ceremonial energies of our songs and prayers once it's cleared off. So that's the work that we're involved in right now.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And yeah, the mesa is beautiful. That just, I can only imagine, when you have ceremony and the three communities come together and the power and the medicine that's there. And I'm just applaud your efforts in helping to keep the mesa healthy, keep it clean, and that ultimately, is fulfilling that sacred covenant you talked about. And I think a lot of tribal nations also have that unique covenant with the Creator to take care of our ecosystem, all the plants and animals, and so that future generations can benefit as well. So thank you for that. Next, I'd like to go to Margo and pose the same question. How did you get started doing this work back in Yurok and across the country, really? And how has your culture informed that work?
Thank you. So I'm going to show a few pictures because we work with fire, and I love to see fire, and I think it really helps to tell the story. So this is my sister in fire, Elizabeth Azuz. She has been instrumental in helping to build the Cultural Fire Management Council. We are located in far northern California, and we started as a very grassroots and continue to be a very grassroots nonprofit organization, community-led. There was 4 of us in a room when we created the Cultural Fire Management Council. We're not a formal part of the tribe. We're still community-based. And this next picture will show you the kind of territory that we are working in. It is very steep and mountainous. The river runs through the middle of our reservation, and our land is really overloaded with vegetation, living and dead, laying on the ground. It's a huge fire hazard. But that actually wasn't the first priority in terms of bringing fire back to our land. It was a priority, but the other big priority is that basket weavers needed hazel sticks to make baskets. The art of basket weaving was dying out because hazel sticks need to be burned in order to produce new shoots that we use with that to make our baskets. And there are other very important cultural resources. As you'll see, we have traditional food, medicine, and basket materials that benefit from fire on the land. Some of them are actually fire dependent. Like I said, the hazel sticks for the frames of the baskets is fire dependent. Also, the white color on our baskets needs fire in order to be useful for basketry. And so we started on this path to not only provide basket weaving materials for basket weavers, but also to protect our elders from wildfire. Because of the intense fuel loads on the ground, we live in a extremely high risk for wildfire. And so we said that we are going to find out how to legally return fire to our land, to reclaim our right as Native people in our homelands to use fire to restore our homelands. We never gave up the right to use fire. There's no paper anywhere that says that we gave up that right. And so we have actually been burning for the past 10 years with the zero escapes. We have a couple of different strategies that we've been using. One of them is family burns, and you'll be able to see the multi-generational family burns taking place here. These burns take place when CAL FIRE doesn't have restrictions on burning, so you don't have to have any special qualifications. You can see kids from the time they're toddlers learning how to burn up to elders to protect their homes and to burn their gathering places. And so this is a traditional way of burning. Families and would burn around their homes and gathering places, and tribes would burn their own territories, and so that all of these the lands were taken care of with fire. Most of the land in the U.S. has evolved with fire and requires fire in order to be healthy. So like I said, this is a traditional way of burning, what we refer to as a cultural burn. It doesn't require a burn plan or any special qualifications. We also wanted to provide jobs for our community members, and so we have another strategy that involves qualified firefighters. And this is one of the ways that we're able to burn large pieces of land. It's called a training exchange. People come from across the United States and other countries to increase their fire qualifications, to get experience doing prescribed burns. And while they're there, we teach them about the benefits of the fire culturally as well as ecologically. And so this is what we would call a prescribed burn with cultural objectives. And so it is we as Native people are leading the burn, and we have chosen places that are rich in cultural resources. So this is another strategy that we use. And we, in addition to reclaiming our own right to use fire, we are reaching out to support other tribes across the nations to reclaim their traditional fire regimes as well. Our homelands that evolved with fire need to be cared for with fire. And this is a quote from one of our co-founders: "Fire is about new life. It purifies. And when the spring comes around, grass, birds, everything is real, enjoyable, new and fresh. The deer, elk, and all wildlife come to the burned areas. For us, fire reconnects us to those spirit beings that are the ancestors of the original spirit beings that created our world the way it is. And in that original agreement that we said that we would take care of them physically and spiritually, and they in turn would take care of us. And so this is one of the ways that we honor that agreement." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margo. And that goes to one of the central initiatives of the conservation work we're doing here at Native Americans in Philanthropy, and that's to ensure that we go back to the traditional tribally led stewardship of our lands, of our forests, of our waterways, and go back to what's been working for thousands of years. So you talk about that cultural burning, taking care of the forest, which in turn takes care of us, and we've gotten away from that with other, policies, either federal or state, and ways that we've harvested our timber and managed our forests. And we need to get back to that in order to restore those forests, those ecosystems, and then also not only to fulfill that covenant that you and and Julia talked about, or Valerie, excuse me, but also to continue those that way of life. You talked about the medicines that the forest provides. Well, sometimes you need good fire to bring those medicines up, and so thank you for that important work and for highlighting that for the folks who are in philanthropy, in our non-governmental organizational world who focus on environmental work, but they might not know about these traditional practices that really we need to elevate and implement across the country. So thank you for that. I'd like to turn to Julia now and ask her that first question. How did you get started in doing this work, and how has your culture informed that work?
Yes, thank you for the question. It'll be very similar to, of course, Valerie and Margo, in that growing up in traditional homes and communities, a lot of our cultural values around stewardship of land and water is very central to our ways of life. And so I got started in this work by way of, wanting to do water conservation. So for those that aren't really familiar with the Southwest region, our geography varies from very semi-arid to arid environments, and so water is a very important resource for us here. Especially around water sharing sort of strategies and ways in which we're utilizing water to either grow our food or grow crops, or different types of practices to also put water on the land in order to provide those ecological services. And so growing up, my father and uncles and brothers have all been large-scale farming operations. And then, like, growing up, have been also starting to see a lot more gardening initiatives in the community as well. And so that stewardship of water has always been really important to me. And starting out in water conservation, I was mainly working with more like Western paradigm land management practices that really didn't include Indigenous worldview or Indigenous practices. And so I felt like that part of the work was really missing for me, which is why I felt really fortunate to come into more of these grassroots movement spaces that talk more about land and water justice and social economic and climate justice, because as Indigenous peoples, we can't really talk about our history without acknowledging the ways in which European settlers had tried to erase us, assimilate us, and oppress us. And so having that narrative included in these advocacy campaigns that talk about land and talk about water and talk about the people has really been very pivotal and galvanizing for me to be involved in Pueblo Action Alliance. The organization was founded out of the Standing Rock movement, which many knew that fight was to protect waterways and protect culture and to honor land treaties. And so ensuring that the US government is also upholding its promises to Indigenous peoples. And so being a part of that experience and then bringing that back to New Mexico has been a lot of our work. We do, Pueblo Action Alliance does a lot of its work around protecting the Greater Chaco region against oil and gas industry and other forms of extractivism, and also, providing more popular education for our community members on, why these issues are important to us and how to get involved and how to articulate these issues as well, to then also bring that information back to their communities. And so definitely trying to come into this work in a holistic, grassroots, community-based approach, because it really is our people that are keeping our culture going. Therefore, I find it extremely important that they also are informed about, you know, what's going on around us and how we can get involved in that type of work.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, so much Indigenous knowledge on display here, and I appreciate your focus on water. You know, it all goes back to water, and so the efforts of not just the Pueblo Action Alliance, but others across Indian country to focus on watershed restoration, and not just quality but quantity of water. I know in the Southwest, in the Colorado Basin, it's a huge issue. So I appreciate the tribes taking the lead in protection of our watersheds and our water resource, because it is the bedrock of all life. And so thank you for that. You spoke about, I think all three of you spoke about how these conservation and environmental restoration efforts from a tribal perspective look a lot different than from like a Western conservation focus. So there's a lot of stereotypes that are in culture and the media and out there, and they're also in the conservation space as well, of our cultures and our different tribes. And so how can in those stereotypes, the actions that are taken on our territories are often damaging, even though they're the organizations are working for the goal of conserving these lands and these waterways, but oftentimes they do damage because they aren't consulting with tribes and they aren't letting tribes take the lead in their homelands, and to be the stewards that we have always been. What are some ways, and I like to go back again to Valerie, what are some ways that you believe we can change that narrative and to educate others on what our definition, from a tribal perspective, from an Indigenous perspective, what our definition of conservation it actually is?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for me, I always say that storytelling is a powerful tool to change narratives. It connects individuals and teaches history, culture, etiquettes, and spiritual beliefs. It also teaches us to learn from mistakes that our ancestors made. Stories are great ways to affirm how we belong to nature and are on equal footing. As Western conservation puts humans first, we don't put humans first, and so just knowing as Indigenous people, this is not so. All of us feel that way. I feel it is a complete opposite of what we believe. So Indigenous conservation worldview, it encompasses everything, includes everything from the smallest ant crawling to whatever's out there in the universe. And so I really feel that interdependence is why we are still here today. And it's through independence and discipline that we can help to elevate not only ourselves, but all that binds all of us together. And this brings us back to the sustainability of our own human values, and the environment, the economy, the culture. Interdependence ensures that diverse community sectors and individuals work together in genuine partnership for the betterment of all. So reminding ourselves too, us as individuals, of our values that we carry as Indigenous people and humanity as a whole, and that we all embrace those types of values, to give help, to others in times of need, to maintain respect for one another, to take initiative, to take care of something without being told, without compensation or recognition, but because it's the right thing to do. If we can begin to realign and humble ourselves again with the understanding that we are not the only living beings in this world, and make an effort to change our lifestyle to lessen our ecological footprint, If we can model that and embrace this type of lifestyle, as actions always speak louder than words, is what I always say. And positive changes will occur that cannot be overlooked. We can then begin to change our narratives and how others view us from the outside looking in.
Mhm.
I appreciate that, Valerie. Incredible insight into how we can tell our own story and speak from our values, and really go back to that connection, that relationship we have with each other, but also with the Creator and with all the gifts that Creator provided us. So appreciate that. I'd like to ask the same question of Margo. What are some ways that you believe we can change that narrative so we can really educate others, whether it's philanthropy or the NGO world or our own communities, who are about the indigenous conservation definition and our way of taking care of the earth and all its gifts?
Thank you for that question, Joel. So the damage that has been done to our environment has been extreme, by greed, by misunderstanding of what it takes to keep the land and water healthy. The hands-off approach to land management or non-land management has been really, really detrimental to the forests. When the non-native people arrived to our shores, they described our lands as park-like, and they wanted to keep them just like that. And so it was a hands-off approach. They had no idea that the land looked like that because of human interaction, of native people caring for those lands and keeping them in that healthy, diverse state of living and being. And so we need to really educate people about what it takes to restore healthy ecosystems. It takes us as humans to realize that we are supposed to be part of that living ecosystem, and we have a responsibility to care for it. As Native people, that knowledge has been passed down for thousands of generations, and we are starting to have avenues to share that information out with the greater public, and the greater public is finally starting to take notice. Unfortunately, it has taken these extreme mega fires for them to realize that, oh, maybe we're doing something wrong, and fear has driven them to look for solutions, and they're turning to Native people for those solutions because, like I said, we've been taking care of this land for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so it is avenues like this today that is really helpful in helping to get that word out, to do presentations online, to go out to groups of people where you can share that information. And people have different roles in helping to share that information depending on what your interests are. There are the reporters who do news stories, there are the book writers, there's the cartoonists, the radios, the videographers, and then there's social media. So all of those are potential opportunities to help change the narrative that these extractive policies are not only are they not working, but they're very, very detrimental. In terms of fire, our land evolved with fire. It needs fire to be healthy. There's no such thing as a no fire option. Either we will cower in our homes waiting for the next wildfire to come, or we will take action and utilize fire on our terms to restore the land to health. So everybody has a piece. Fire belongs in the hands of the people. We all have different responsibilities to help take care of the land and to start changing that narrative.
Thank you, Margo, and yeah, thank you for telling your story, and our whole panel for really educating our community here. And like you said, that's what NAP does. We're going to lift up and elevate the stories of our tribes who are continuing their stewardship that we've done for thousands and thousands of years, and being successful in balancing the needs of the people with the needs of the earth. And you talk about, traditional conservation, from a white through a white lens has been more of, let's just protect it by locking it up and not touching it or not utilizing it. And that's not what the indigenous, what the tribal perspective is. We work with the land and we caretake for the land. And so we're really trying to elevate that and those stories that really back it up on how they're successful. Like you said, there's good fire and there's bad fire. And so the tribes knew over thousands of years how to utilize that tool. And so we want to educate the folks in philanthropy and in the environmental NGO space about those successful traditional practices. I'd like to ask the same question of Julia, and so how can we change that narrative? How can we? Do you have any ideas on how we can really elevate indigenous conservation and our true definition of that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to add too much more because, what Margo and Valerie are saying around the ways in which Western conservation and like concepts like wilderness really do separate people from land. They separate land from water, and there's just a lot of isolation happening where we're not looking at the ecosystem in a holistic type of way. Really does have a lot of its roots in European settler colonialism. A lot of people are talking about how colonization has stripped a lot of these traditional land practices away from indigenous people and other types of traditional communities that are here throughout the Southwest particularly. And so I feel like talking about how colonization has impacted land-based practices is a way in which that we can start shifting narratives, because ultimately this concept of that man has dominance over the natural world really isn't playing out. We're seeing that even in the face of climate crisis, that there is a reaction to the ways in which global land management is creating an imbalance. And we're seeing that in the ways of climate devastation. And so decentering those types of Eurocentric and Western conservation practices is really going to be one of those solutions in order for indigenous knowledge and practices to be more centered in how we're managing land and water and communities. Because ultimately, in the indigenous worldview and the dominant paradigm that we're living in just aren't working together, and they haven't been for some time now. Because we don't have those foundational values of reciprocity or respect for the land and stewardship, love, care. A lot of those core values are embedded into global capitalist systems. It's more just about like extracting resources and consolidating wealth with like only a small percent of people. And so if we are able to decenter that way of thinking and uphold indigenous leadership, indigenous sovereignty, I do believe that is going to be a way to shift things, but we have to allow ourselves to lean into some of these uncomfortable conversations around colonialism and land grabs and, some of like the not so the not so good side of history in order for us to, create solutions for the future. But I really do think that that conversation is happening right now. And that's why it's, really important to have, these types of platforms in order to share that perspective and that analysis in order for that shift to happen.
Thank you so much for that insight, Julia. And yeah, I see that all the time, working with either foundations or with these nonprofits about just the siloing of these individual areas of the ecosystem, whether it's water or land or oceans, and really that's something that we as tribes, as indigenous peoples, do not see. It's all connected. And so thank you for highlighting that and some of the origins of that, like you said, from the colonial period, and the fact that we're trying to face that head on, and not shy away from that bad parts of history, because we need to reverse some of that and correct some of that. So I appreciate that. I'll flip the order. So I'll stay with you, Julia, on this next question. And you talked a little bit about Indigenous leadership within these spaces. And so recently there's been a call for conservation work to shift power to more Indigenous leadership. As we know, leaders in our tribal communities are not just the elected leaders on tribal council, but we have elder leaders, youth leaders, we have leaders in the community. What do you feel is important to ensure the leaders in grassroots organizations are also a part of that conversation?
Yes, I mean, a lot of the times our people don't have the opportunity to be in like political positions or those types of political leadership positions. And so I do find it extremely important for the opportunity for community members that do a lot of work directly with their communities, or, are building partnerships with other non-governmental entities is extremely important, because they, in some respect, are removed by a sense of that type of governance structure. And ultimately, what a lot of the global Indigenous rights advocacy is for, Indigenous peoples, like as ourselves, to have rights. Like we have rights to enjoy being Indigenous. We have rights to building our own economies. We have rights to clean air and clean water. And so having the nonprofit sector or non-governmental sector be a way to develop leadership skills and leadership like confidence with Indigenous peoples, I find is extremely important, because ultimately Indian country is really small. And then when you start breaking things down in Indian country, there's only like so many people that are in leadership positions. And so we are really needing to create more pathway programs for our community members to also be engaged in this work, because one, it's protecting our cultural lifeways and revising stewardship practices is ultimately really sustainable for our communities. And so for me, I would like to see, more and more of those opportunities being made available and accessible for community members, because it empowers, it gives leadership development skills. And ultimately, we need that in order for us to change narratives, change paradigms. We need more of our people to obtain and utilize those different types of skill sets, because that is what's going to shift the way that we're thinking about climate and land and water management.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's such a huge crisis and problem to address, that I think we need more and more of our community members, not just our elected leaders, but all of our community leaders, to understand the issues, and then also get educated and provided the tools and resources so they can be engaged and take leadership in tackling the crisis as well. So thank you for your efforts in that arena. I'd like to ask the same question to Margo. Why do you feel it's important to ensure leaders and grassroots organizations are also a part of the conversation that we're talking about tribally led conservation?
The leaders of Native nonprofits have placed themselves in that arena because we have a driving need to make change in our communities. And we will do whatever it takes to make sure those positive changes happen because we live in those communities and we see the need and we have a vision. We have a vision of how to make it happen. And as smaller nonprofits, we're able to take action in a much quicker, more efficient way than big organizations, whether that's government organizations or tribal organizations. Tribal organizations have they have a lot of different areas that they are working on to restore their homelands, our homelands. And sometimes it takes them, longer to get programs going. And so we will often be working in collaboration with tribes to help to help support what the goals of the tribes are, to help bring to the forefront what the community needs are, because we are the community. That's who we are. We're the community and we are helping to drive change. And so it's important that the people who are the cultural practitioners have a voice in that arena.
Thank you, Margo. So true. When we're talking about our members, our family, our friends who are out there, they're harvesting if it's salmon or if it's food, but also if it's medicines or items like you were talking about from the forest where we're making baskets and other items. Like we need the voice of those people who are out there exercising those treaty rights and who actually have that connection to what's going on in our watersheds, on our lands. We need those voices represented, and I think a pathway for that is through Indigenous nonprofits. And so I appreciate the talk of collaboration too, because it's we're not working in a vacuum. We need to work hand in hand with our tribal governments because of that unique political relationship that tribes have with the federal government. And so I think it's a collective effort, and we need to have more of that collaboration you're talking about. I'd like to ask Valerie that question. So from your perspective, why do you feel it's important to ensure tribal leadership, such as yourself and grassroots organizations, are a part of this movement to have more tribally led conservation efforts?
So I feel it's important because we are the people doing the work on the ground and know intimately what the problems are that need to be addressed and worked on. I learned from my mother and grandmother that when they would take us foraging for neveni, wild edible plants, to only take what was needed and to not over harvest, to not disrupt the delicate ecosystem. And we learned to ask permission to harvest the plants first, and put our prayers out as we harvest it. You then start to realize that you are only a smaller part of the bigger picture in the world, and that we need one another, humans and plants and animals, to ensure our existence. So when you come to have this respect within yourself and cultivate this in your children, you will then understand you can achieve these reciprocal relationships by uplifting one another. And this is what great leaders do. They help to lift others and to find their potential. They teach them how to harvest resources and do so only when they need to ensure, to ensure the longevity of our people. Our grandfather, Yu Young Lewis Nepu, he's gone now, but he was a spiritual leader here at First Mesa for many, many years. And he told us that he always carried the people with him everywhere in everything he did and decisions he had to make, always placing their interests above his own personal gain, while taking into consideration how his decisions would affect our grandchildren and grandchildren down the line. So this is an important piece to include, and this is why grassroots organizations need to continue to be in the conversation, and why leaders need to carry the voices of grassroots organizations with them as they make decisions for our future.
Thank you, Valerie, for reminding us of that, and the need to have those folks who are intimately every day working with those gifts from the Creator, and so they know what they need. They know what the ecosystems need, what the plants, what the animals need. So it's always good to be reminded of that, and so to do all that great work, to clean up the mesa, to ensure that more traditional fire practices are implemented, and to take care of our water resources, that all requires funding. You guys don't do this work for free. It costs a lot of money. And so what, when you're going after funding for your work, what are some of the most common challenges you face? And I'll ask Julia first.
Yes, well, I mean, I want to give like a little bit of credit. I think that there has been a shift in ways funding Indigenous-led projects or organizations. I feel like there's been some significant change in the past 5 years, because for a very long time, I think there was a statistic that was like less than 1% of philanthropic dollars go to Indigenous-led projects and organizations. And as we're entering more and more conversations around the need to include a diverse spectrum of stakeholders in climate mitigation strategies, the need is to fund and resource these Indigenous-led organizations is becoming more and more apparent. But the challenge with that is that we are now faced with having to compete for a lot of these dollars with other organizations. And for me, I find that our best work is often done in coalition spaces, not just the work of like our organization, but working in partnership with other Indigenous-led organizations has also been a really important avenue for us to create the change that we want to see, or at least have some sort of measurable impact in our organizational goals and operations. And so, having to explain to our funders that there's a need for them to support us to be involved in this coalition work can oftentimes be challenging. I think also too, dependent on like what the geography is, that can also be a challenge, especially for like some of these very large and rural landscapes. Travel costs is something that always kind of comes up in the conversation as well, or reaching different types of rural communities can also be challenging. But I think it's just about getting our funders to just really understand like who we are, what communities we come from, and what types of Indigenous grassroots organizing strategies we utilize. Getting them to understand that is definitely going to be important for future funding initiatives. And as we all, and also just like this is kind of going off a little bit, but we're now in this like very robust digital age, and so the need for funders to also recognize that we're having to also explore like how we protect ourselves digitally is also another aspect of the work that I think is coming up more and more. But it's really just about understanding who we are, the communities that we come from, and the landscapes that we're working with is going to be really important for how we receive future funding opportunities.
Thank you for that, Julia. And I appreciate you also mentioning that there has been a shift. And I've experienced that too. I've been in philanthropy for around 16 months or so. And but prior to that, I worked on the policy side of things, working for the Northwest tribes, and then I sat on my tribal council. And so I've seen a shift, definitely. And we have a lot of good partners and allies, and in the philanthropic world who understand the need for tribes to be in the leadership role on these conservation efforts, climate efforts, the energy transition, getting off fossil fuels. I think there's a lot who get it, who are receptive, and I think we're just building that momentum and pushing forward with even more and more partners. But I'd like to ask the same question of Margo. When you're going after funding for your work, what are some of the most common challenges you face?
So I would like to agree with both of you that the funding opportunities have been experiencing a shift, and that's a good thing. There are still several funding challenges. One of those challenges is for a lot of the funding, specifically state funding, it's tied to specific projects. And so you have to identify the area that you're going to be treating. And if any needs come up outside of that, like for us, an elder comes to us and says, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid that, I got all this brush around my house. I'm afraid of a wildfire. And we're like, oh gosh, that's not in our project area. And so it's really problematic. We do it anyway. We have some additional fundings that we do get from foundations, and those are operational expenses that which is really helpful from foundations, so that we can extend our services out to those other kinds of areas that are identified in the specific areas of some of the grants. Some other challenges are that there is very limited funds available for equipment and infrastructure. And in our arena, Native communities are really stepping up to the plate and wanting to start their own fire programs. But fire engines are expensive, and you need a building to house them, and all of that. So those limited funds for that is definitely a challenge. A lot of the federal monies are tied to federal lands. So like the U.S. Forest Service monies, a lot of them is looking to pay Native groups, tribes, and Native-led organizations to do work on their land and or land adjacent to them. So if you don't, if your area is a distance away, then it isn't very helpful. Another thing is that for state and federal funding, in order to do any work on the ground, you have to have the CEQA and NEPA, the environmental compliance documents, which take a long time to complete and are really expensive. So that's really problematic. There are often intense reporting requirements where you spend practically as much time writing grants and reporting as doing the work. And so, we like to get right to the job, and we really appreciate those foundations that don't require an intense amount of reporting. It's just like an annual report of what you accomplished for that year with general operating funds. Another challenge is that there's not really any long-term funding available. So like most of our grants are, well, all of our grants are between 1 and 3 years. And so when we hire people, it's like, well, this is a grant funded position. We can hire you for this long, and then hopefully we get more. So it makes it really hard to keep employees and also to do long-term planning. And, you know, this is a long-term goal. It's not even going to happen in our lifetime. These are generational goals that we are pursuing. You know, our land didn't get in such a sad state overnight. It took at least 100 years, whenever it is that your land was first colonized, you know. And so we're not going to overnight be able to fix it. So we have long-term plans, and we need long-term funding to do that.
Thanks, Margo, for putting a finer point on that and stressing the relationships of these foundations with Indigenous organizations, because you're right, it needs to be built on trust, and it needs to be, so that means like general operating grants, not because you're right. Sometimes we get so focused on project specific grants that it's really not driven then by the organization or the community, right? It's driven by whatever the grant requirements are, and if they're more long-term general operating grants that build up a trust between the two parties, that you can accomplish the priorities that the community wants in a more effective manner. So that's something we're really trying to push from Native Americans in Philanthropy, is that trust-based philanthropy and relationship with our Indigenous communities, and that there's still reporting, but it's not burdensome, and we're getting on the ground and doing the work that's needed. So thank you for that. Wanted to ask the same question of Valerie. When it comes to getting funding for your work, what are some of the most common challenges you face?
For us, a lot of what Margo talked about was really something that was hindering our progress as well. But also living in a rural area, we often didn't meet the criteria of some of the larger grants because the internal infrastructure of our communities are not developed well enough, of our villages here. For Hopi, our tribal programs are just trying to stay afloat. It's the same with the individual village administrations. And so the Mojave generating station was 80% of the revenue of it's just imposed a highly disproportionate everybody out here. So internet service is limited. Any broadband, our broadband is limited. So that hinders a lot of things for communication, for social media, for online platforms, even for the online grant portals that everybody is switching over to now. Also, we were happy that one of our funders, Justice Outside, was able to just do an interview like this over a Zoom interview. And that's how we applied for the funds from there. And it was also great to hear that they were going to extend our funding out a couple of years. So you're able to plan, things, because that money's coming in. With other grants, you don't have that, that you're going to be getting it the following year. For Hopi also, we struggled with finding a fiscal sponsor. We're not a nonprofit, we're just fiscally sponsored. And there's a lot of organizations out here that have trouble getting started because they can't find a fiscal sponsor. So Seventh Generation is our fiscal sponsor, and that's in California, Arcata, California. So we're also grateful that when, like I said, the reporting from Liberated passed, we were able to just do one annual reporting, and it was over like a conversation like this. And that was really helpful instead of writing all like a huge report for what you have to do all the time. And also another thing that's insufficient is data collection. So this is an area I'm working on strengthening as numbers create the picture, for what your organization needs. And there's also some grants that require matching donations, which we aren't able to do as well. And for our organization, I'm the only hired staff. The rest are volunteers. And we felt the need for someone to be hired and to be on top of all the grants and communication. And but that takes a huge part of your budget as well, so there's little left to do to hire other staff or to even focus on the project too, so there's all those things. And so the staff, I mean, because I'm the only staff and we work with volunteers, it's really hard because our volunteers also have jobs. Of course, they're means to support themselves, so they're not, you're not able to really uh, like how staff, you would expect them to do this and that. With volunteers, it's what they can give and on their own time. So that's a little bit hard to do, to manage. We also, let me see, I have some things written down here. So some grants also require us to show that we're making a social impact, which becomes more complex as we know there's many factors why our people are not stewarding the land the way we used to. And so it brings about that mental health aspect of our people. And understanding that depth of generational trauma is one area we would like to explore more, because we're not social workers. So it's hard to kind of measure that kind of impact, but it's something also that we need to explore, because a lot of our people are still dealing with historical trauma, generational historical trauma. So those types of impacts are harder to measure and to report on.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, you hit on a point that I think we're hearing from a lot of tribes and indigenous nonprofits, and that's the capacity needs. And everybody's stretched. You actually have the majority volunteers. You just have one full time. So like you're doing so much with so little. And so we really wanted to focus on building up the capacity of tribes and indigenous communities and nonprofits, and just the bare bones. Like you talked about internet, you talked about broadband, and just as you were saying that, there's a little glitchiness. So it's like it's evident we're out there in rural areas and we're trying to get broadband, we're trying to get the bare necessities for functioning as a community, our economy, and how we can enhance these conservation efforts. It all goes back to some of that bare bones capacity. If it's infrastructure or if it's people power. And so we're really emphasizing that for philanthropy to invest in that space as well would be extremely beneficial. We have a couple more questions to go. And this one, I wanted to, I'll reverse the order. I'll go back to Valerie on this one. And you kind of touched on this a little bit. Our communities are often faced with hard decisions to survive. And sometimes that involves extraction of natural resources that our traditional cultures wouldn't normally support. How do you approach the harsh contrast between what we have to do to survive and what we need to do to continue to protect our homelands, our ecosystems that are vital to our cultures?
Okay, so that's a hard question for me, because that's what happened on Hopi. Peabody extracted billions and billions of water from here to slurry coal, pristine water, drinking water, to slurry coal to the Mojave generating station for California, Nevada, and for Arizona. So for me, I was really against that. We kept wanting to shut it down. I was just trying to be part of the conversation in the community when Black Mesa Trust, led by Vernon Messiaspa, was trying to get that shut down. And so it was really hard because, like I said, 80% of the revenue from the Hopi tribe was coming from Peabody coal. So people were putting money above our water. And so that was a really hard time. And it still is a hard time because we experienced the drought over the past 8 years. Our harvest, we haven't been able to harvest our from what we're living on the stores that my father harvested from years before, and we're getting down to the bottom stores of our harvest now because we haven't been able to harvest in abundance. And it's definitely made an impact on our community and our people, and our springs drying up and all of that. So how do you measure? I mean, how do you oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question because I was against it. My family was against it. Peabody, and now that they're done extracting everything from our lands, they're not coming back to fix up anything. You know, they're supposed to be have court order to fix the lands there, to restore springs and stuff like that. But realistically, who's gonna hold them to it? You know, no one's holding them to this. So um, I was happy when it was closing, and I was happy that they were no longer gonna be here. But I was in the minority. A
Mm.
lot of people still were relying on that. Our whole tribal programs were relying on that money. So I'm happy that it's closed, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that aren't happy. So I don't know how to answer that question really, because we're feeling the effects of what happened, and now Peabody moved on. They're off our off Black Mesa, but we're still dealing with the effects of it now.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult question. Thank you for trying to tackle it, but also tell your story of a real life example of that, how that extractive industry impacted Hopi and the Mesa and all the communities around it, and that you're going to be living with for quite some time, like you were talking about, and the efforts to clean up and hold Peabody accountable. So thank you for telling that story, because it really highlights the devastation that short-term, financial gain from these extractive
Mhm.
industries can cause.
Mhm.
And when tribes have to weigh that decision, they can have that knowledge at their disposal, like that we need to look go down a different path, where we can try to support our people and build an economy, but not have to damage our environment, our resources with this extractive industries. Um,
Mhm.
I know it's a tough question, but I'll ask Margo the same one. How do you tackle that difficult question? The needs of the community to just survive,
Mhm.
and to have what we need in this, in this current age. We need to have money flowing in for our families to take care of ourselves. So how do you balance that with the fact that some of those businesses and economic drivers impact our natural resources negatively? How do we balance that, protect our homelands, but also support our communities?
Gosh, Valerie, my heart just goes out to you for such a devastating thing to have happen and to have no say over changing the course of that.
Mhm. Thank
Um,
you.
so, as a native-led nonprofit on the Yurok reservation, we make restoration of our homelands an opportunity to support the local economy. And so that is, there's no amount of work there to be done in terms of restoring the lands and the water and the habitat for the animals. Providing access to cultural resources reduces families' grocery and bill, as well as their pharmacy bill, because there's medicines out on the land. It also offers opportunities for individuals to make money from crafting, basket weaving or medicinal salves or different things. from that. And so that's my brief answer.
Thanks, Margo, for that, and the leadership of Yurok, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take tribes and indigenous nonprofits to really elevate that perspective. That we're not to flip it. We're not going to put profits over the earth and over our solemn commitment and obligation to take care of the earth. So thank you for that. Julia, I'll ask the same question of you, this tough question about how to strike a balance between the needs of our people, mainly the economic needs of our people, and the restoration and protection of our environment that we've depended on for thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, Valerie's example of Hopi and Peabody Corporation is really one that resonates with a lot of young people and that are doing this work. Having to live with the decisions made by those that were in positions of power before us is ultimately what a lot of the youth climate action work has been about. Having to suffer from those consequences and fight for a place in decision making structures for what we're going to do for the future. And I find that a lot of young people that I work with have been relating to our history of resistance. So, for example, in our organization, Pueblo Action Alliance, we really acknowledge and embody the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, which was, a mobilized direct action to drive Spanish conquest out of New Mexico, so that way we could continue living our traditional life ways. And that resistance is a very important part of our history, so much to that we are working to keep that history really relevant with the work that we're doing now. Because unfortunately, our people have been coerced into thinking that extractivism is a way for our tribes to gain revenue, and at times we all feel like we're losing a lot of our values as Native people. And so remembering and embodying our history of Indigenous resistance is ultimately, I feel, a way for us to move from sort of like these capitalist values of that put man as man's dominion over the natural world. Because, I hear folks say like your health is your wealth, or, the health of our community is more important than money. And I completely agree with that. And so how can we, adopt to more regenerative type of economies that are ultimately focusing on economies around wellness and care, or remediation and cleanup? I mean, those are some of the conversations that we've been having in when we're talking about a just transition from fossil fuel industries, or other types of extractive economies. And so I really do want to just give like a big hug to all of our young people that are really challenging those decisions that were made without them, because it's ultimately future that is at stake. And it's important for us to continue supporting them, in this work.
Thank you, Julia. And you're right. With the new generations, things are changing. We were putting in tough decisions, back 20, 30, 40 years ago, where we didn't have some of the resources or economies or built up our governmental capacities that we have now. And so we were kind of forced into bad deals. And I think a lot of the new generation, the young people, are starting to see that there's another way, there's another pathway to get back to our old ways, which our economies were based on the natural resources, but they weren't, detrimentally extractive like the mining and other operations. Now they were a balanced utilization of those gifts from the creator. So I think right now is a great movement going on where we're shifting to understanding those paths and getting back to having robust economies, but also having that going back to our resources, and in a more balanced manner where we are and this is, I think I've seen this with talking with youth leadership groups and other folks in the sector, is that the youth are really driving that, and they see an opportunity to reconnect with their homelands and get out there and see that there are careers and pathways to making a good living for themselves and their families, where they're going back to their old tradition, their old ways. And so I hope that we can elevate that here at NAP, and that we can help you as Indigenous nonprofits elevate that new pathway, that we can restore that connection and to the land and get our economies back to that level. We only have time for just some closing remarks and maybe one question. And so I will start with I'll start with Margo this time, since you didn't get to start any of the other questions. So our audience is largely made up of funders with opportunities to change philanthropy through partnerships with organizations like yours. What would be one thing that you would want to leave with them so they have a better understanding of, and specifically, how could they make funding more accessible to organizations like yours?
Thank you. Foundation funding allows Native NGOs latitude in addressing community needs at a grassroots level and to involve the communities we serve in the healing of our people and the land that supports our cultural lifeways. Investing in NGOs is really helpful. Native NGOs can get things done effectively and with less overhead costs than government agencies. Native NGOs approach their work from a cultural perspective, which is critically important to restoration, sustainable practices, and holistic management practices. We have a vested interest and long-term multi-generational vision that drives our work. Our long-term visions need long-term funding, so we're not constantly grant writing to support our efforts. There's no short-term fix. Long-term funding is essential. If there's one thing that I could change regarding funding NGOs, it would be to turn 1 or 2 or 3 year funding into 10-year funding for general operating expenses.
Huh? Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Margo, for those really pointed remarks and guidance for our folks from the foundations who are on the call today. That's clear guidance that would help move the needle on a lot of these efforts, and to focus on the Indigenous nonprofits and their piece in accomplishing those goals. Next, I'll go to Valerie, provide you some space right here for some closing words, and and specifically, what would you like to leave with them, so they have a better understanding of, and with particular focus on how could they make funding more accessible to you and others like yourself.
I know we said one thing that they could do, but I have 2 things. One is to have rolling deadlines, so we don't have to be worried about throughout the year instead of just one deadline. Another thing is to accept proposals and reports in alternative formats, like including audio through Zoom or Word documents. That would make things a lot easier. Also, and just to let you know that the work we are doing isn't making ourselves rich. We're not getting rich off of this work that we're doing. And also, just if you have an opportunity to, you have an opportunity, I'm saying to the funders, to establish a culture of giving for generations to come. And I encourage you to step out of your comfort zones and go to see the work firsthand that's being done. Talk face to face with us, and so you get to know us instead of just reading the paper, applications or whatever you get, however you look at the applications, and see for yourself so you can gain a better understanding of the systemic challenges that grassroots organizations are facing right now. So I really encourage you to come and visit. You're welcome on Hopi anytime. Come visit our home. You're welcome to our house during ceremonies. So that's what I would like to say, to extend that invitation to come see the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Valerie. I hope the invitation extends to us on the panel and myself, because I want to go out and visit your mesa. Definitely definitely want to participate and be there for a ceremony. I've never been, so this is something that we can always learn from each other and share our stories. And so I want to be in your homelands one of these days.
You're all welcome to come.
All right. Next, to close, ask Julia for some closing remarks, and if there's something, not just one thing, because you're right, there's so much to leave, but if there's a couple things you'd like to leave with our audience here to have them a better understanding of, and particularly how can we shift those resources that you talked about. You talked about that statistic, right, of less than 0.5% of overall philanthropic giving going to Indian country. How can we shift that? How can we get more of those resources to Indigenous organizations like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to agree with everything that Valerie and Margo pointed out, because those are very real things, and those are challenges that we're always having to overcome. But I think like these if foundations and philanthropy are able to adopt more of these Indigenous theories of change, that can also help provide those resources, because a lot of the time too, this work is heart work, this is life work, and a lot of us acknowledge that we may not even see the type of change that we want to see in our lifetimes, but what we're ultimately trying to do is just keep building to that foundation, because we stand on our ancestors and elders' shoulders, and we also want to be a part of that cycle. And so having a clearer and more like inclusive understanding of how we see theory of change is going to be really important. And I think that philanthropy can also do great work by looking to Indigenous-led foundations that are willing to go out to visit their grantees, that are that share similar worldviews and understandings of the people that they fund. I mean, I want to also acknowledge Valerie's sister, Marissa, who works at the Colorado Plateau Foundation, which is Indigenous-led and is really focusing on sustainable Indigenous lifeways, which are ultimately, really global projects. Even though they may seem super small, super localized, Indigenous people, what we do in ceremony is really for the whole world. And so even if it is a small project of revitalizing sustainable farming systems or getting youth out to our waterways, those teachings and those values are going to have global impact. I really do believe that. And so I just want to keep challenging philanthropy to center Indigenous worldview, Indigenous ways of thinking, and the ways in which we take action as well. So I can go ahead and end there. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Julia. And thanks for shining a light on Indigenous-led funds as well. I think, Valerie, you mentioned 7th Generation Fund. And they are huge supporters of this tribally led conservation work. They were one of the first investors in NAP's Tribal Conservation Pledge and Fund Collaborative, and they were right there with Christensen Fund as well, and really driving and trying to change the narrative and really incorporate the indigenous views of conservation and trusting us and understanding that we have this knowledge that's been built up for thousands and thousands of years, and to finally invest in that knowledge and building those new youth and tribal leadership so that we can accomplish the restoration of our homelands, which everyone benefits from, and we can tackle this climate crisis and shift us off of fossil fuels and restore our homeland. So Thank you for all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for all the insight and the wisdom and just on the ground work that you provide your communities and for Indian country as a whole. Really appreciate you joining us today. And thank you all of us who joined virtually on all the platforms that we have. We're so honored to uplift the voices and the work of these remarkable community leaders that we had on the panel. And there's so many more that are not here, but they are just as remarkable, doing excellent work back in their communities. And we hope that their stories that they're sharing, their experiences, will help each of you in your own work. There's a call to action that we have for folks who want to stay engaged and get more involved. We have Earth Day coming up just in a couple days here on the 22nd. And we encourage you to join us in this movement wherever you can. If you're a funder and want to support these leaders, please visit their websites directly. I think they were put, the links were put up as we were going on this broadcast. You can also learn more about how to get involved on a broader scale, such as the Tribal Nations Conservation Pledge and Fund Collaborative I mentioned. You can visit atbc.nativephilanthropy.org, or you can reach out to info@nativegiving.org and set up a conversation with myself and our other team members at Native Americans in Philanthropy. If you haven't already, you should be receiving an email shortly with a link to a brief survey. Hopefully you can take some time and share your thoughts. It probably averages around less than 5 minutes. It really does help us to improve these sessions that we're going to have monthly. And as a reminder, this session was open to the public as a highlight for our member benefits. And if you're not a NAP member and you want to learn more, please visit nativephilanthropy.org or email our Director of Development, Rod Jacobs, at rjacobs@nativephilanthropy.org and become a member. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month for our next member education session. Thank you.